Welcome to the End the Silence podcast. I'm your host, Sandra Payne. As an RN and holistic wellness coach working with nurses, I am uniquely positioned to hear the struggles, the deep passions, and the stories of nurses, our silent heroes. Many nurses suffer with burnout, depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance abuse, and suicidality, and they do so in silence. Nurses are the ones we turn to for help when we need it the most, and this is a heavy burden for them to carry. This burden, the pervasive bullying and unsupportive culture of our healthcare system, means many nurses have lost their voice. These are their stories. Hey everyone, it's Sandra Payne here, your host of the End the Silence podcast. I'm here today with my special guest, Katrina Stephenson, who is a registered nurse in Alberta. She's also the founder of the Nurse to Nurse Peer Support Organization out of Alberta. And we're joining you today for a special episode because this is a conversation that Katrina and I have had many times privately and have, done our best to share it with our community separately. But we wanted to come together today to talk with you about kind of, how do we give it an umbrella term? I think it's really boils down to the division in our profession as nurses. And so we're going to talk about a lot of different things today, and we'll see kind of what comes up. But first of all, to kind of just set the stage is Katrina and I recently, we had partnered on a project that we were doing together to support our peers, other nurses in Canada. And we found ourselves on the receiving end of some judgment. And myself specifically, I'll just, I'll own that and name that. Myself specifically feeling that discrimination for my personal beliefs. And it's definitely stirred a lot inside of me. And I know it has for you too, Katrina. And so I want to talk about that. But I would like to just, really let you all know kind of how that impacted me and kind of where I landed even and how I have worked my way through it. Because I could think back, years ago, and if something like that situation would have happened to me, where I felt so just oppressed and pushed down and just beaten and abused and just, like the weak version of me, I can think back and really have a clear idea of how I would have responded back then, just in complete despair. And it would have eaten me up. It would have landed me, in a bout of severe depression, and I would have turned to all sorts of substances to try to numb that out. And that was my reality years ago. Thankfully, and I am so extremely grateful that I am where I am right now in my own healing journey. And so when I take hits like that, which seem to sometimes, come all at once, it definitely hurt. And I'm not going to minimize that. I am going to just really stand in the fact that it really hurt. And it shook me. It made me question what I was doing. It made me question who I am. It made me question my beliefs and my values. It made me question the nursing profession even more than I already have. It made me question the regulatory or the governing kind of bodies that we look to for support. It made me really spiral. But what I am mostly grateful for is that these internal resources and the external support system that I have, that I was able to turn to and I was able to access to pull myself through it and to really look at this as an opportunity. I do believe in everything there is an opportunity. And so even in the shittiest of shit situations, there is something golden for us to mine. And I've been looking for it. And I do think that this is a part of it, is really bringing this conversation, this conversation to just to the forefront without any kind of, veil or shield. Is just, let's talk about it and let's talk about the impact that it's having, and let's just be real about it. So I'm super, I won't lie, I'm kind of nervous, but also excited to have this conversation. So Katrina, maybe you want to share with us a little bit about how, or who you are and kind of like how this has hit you too.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Sandra, for being vulnerable and being here today to talk about this, because we'll get into this more, but we're seeing how it's affecting our profession, our culture, our work environment. So yeah, so like you said, we were partnered on a project together, supporting our peers, and we were asked not to do that anymore. And it was because of a belief that a belief that you were holding and hold, and I won't speak to that. That's your part. But I was also there, and I was right beside you as your peer, and I witnessed all of it. And I witnessed how oppressive it was. It brought me back to the days of being a frontline nurse, and really speaking to the supports we didn't have, how we were struggling, how I was struggling, and just being told that I was exaggerating. That was one instance out of many. And so that systemic kind of oppression, it felt really gross, to tell you the truth. And I witnessed how you were being judged, how you were being discriminated against. So, and the other part I was witnessing was how there was so much, it was so harmful. We didn't have a voice. We were, told that was it. And we didn't even, we asked if we could appeal what was happening. No. And here we are, two nurses that really are passionate about caring for and supporting our peers because of our own lived experience of, our own occupational or operational stress injuries, traumatic stress injuries that we had to walk through. And, it brought up a lot of wounds. I talk about the window of tolerance. I was dysregulated like no one's business. And what was neat about it, in the sense of like the things that we go through, we walk through and can walk through the other side, is that, I was able to take those tools that I had, I've learned over the years, and put it towards that. And because I could, look and see the lens, from the lens I was coming from, the trauma-informed harm reduction lens that I walk a lot through, I was able to see, and from what I hear from peers on a regular basis, is I was able to see that these two opposing views that are within our profession, that have really been highlighted since COVID came about, were now harming us as two nurses trying to do the work and trying to support our peers. And so, that highlighted a problem for me.
Yeah.
So that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just going to celebrate you too, just as I celebrate myself, really. Also, just I think it's something that we owe to ourselves, is just to really acknowledge and appreciate how far we've come in our own personal journeys, to recognize, when you are outside of that window of tolerance. And I love the visual, because it just allows us to see, like, oh my God, here I am. And then having access to these tools, which is, it's so much a part of what we're doing, right? Like, we've recognized our own injury, our own, despair, our own muck that we have been through. And we've figured out some tools to get us out. And we have proven it to ourselves over and over again that this shit works. And we want to give it to everybody. We're like, come on, like, this is not hopeless. You are not helpless. Yep. All you have to do is just learn and practice, and then rinse and repeat, and just do it over and over and over. Because there's never going to be a shortage of challenges in life, right? So it's just, how are we going to respond to them, is what determines our state, really, and how we move forward with our life. And, and I see you looking at the same things. And I hold so much gratitude for you as well, for standing with me in that, and for standing up for me too. Because anybody that knows me knows I'm a very emotional person. And so definitely when I was feeling extremely triggered and extremely dysregulated, my tears come, and it can be very difficult for me to articulate during those moments. And so I had so much appreciation for you then, and still do, just for standing with me. But I want to talk a little bit more, I think, about the impact, right? This is important. We know the issue, we've been divided on a lot of different issues in healthcare over the years, right? Like this is not a new thing that we don't all agree, right? We've worked in nursing, you and I, the same kind of roughly around the same amount of years, and dealing with the same kind of stuff. Like we don't always agree. Some people believe this should happen. Some people believe this should happen. Some people are told this should happen, even though they're like, I don't think that's the right thing. It's all the time, right? But right now we are like standing on the edge, and we have been pushed to this edge, and these beliefs about COVID, about vaccines, about masks, about, schooling, about the children, about like, there's so much that's kind of like swirling in this storm, and really pushing people to the edge. And the edge is what I want to talk about, because the edge is where I see people standing every single day, and you too. And doing this work, working with supporting nurses who are kind of at that point, it is extremely difficult work, one that I wouldn't trade for anything. But at the same time, it's important that we talk about it, because there are lots of nurses out there who are really struggling hard. And so I'm curious, maybe you want to kind of kick this off and talk about what your experience has been, and what you've noticed, and as far as the impact that this division and this separation of our, in our nursing culture has created.
Yeah, for sure, Sandra. It brings up a lot of, even it brings up fear, even like that we're here talking about this, like in me, and I'm recognizing that, and I'm like, no, but this needs to be talked about, is what my other part of my thought process is. And from this position that I'm in, where I support nurses and I hear from them, because one of the biggest things that I bring, and our nurse to nurse peer circles, is that we build a really safe container. And so one-on-one, people will come to me, and nurses will come to me and speak to me about what's happening to them. So we know that there's been mandates. We know that there are nurses that on that spectrum of COVID, we're all over the place, right? But we know from what's happening in the world that if you speak to it, then all of a sudden you're given a label. You're labeled, and so it's just really silenced us even more than what we were before. Correct? So I have nurses approaching me saying things like, I'm trying to get an exemption, when we were trying to get the exemptions for vaccines, and my doctor won't give it to me, for instance. And then my line was posted at work, and they found out it was me, my colleagues being they, and this nurse was targeted. She was told, quote unquote, I hope you get COVID-19 and die. So, here we are. We have had work short-staffed for years. I can even remember my grandma, who's passed now, was speaking to that. So here we are. We're in a mental health crisis. The healthcare system has been broken. It was broken before. Now COVID has totally annihilated it, and we're just trying to keep it together. And then we're told we have to put something in our body, and we're not given a choice, and there's lots to that. And this is what, in one instance, now there's many, that this is an extreme one, that a nurse was told in distress and in crisis, already dealing with a mental health injury, calls me and says, this is what just happened to me. So we see trauma continuously, and then we are attacking each other because we're not supported in this work environment, in the world, to even have an opinion. Because if we do, we might be attacked, harassed, and so think about that for a second. You're at work, and someone comes up to you that you've worked with for years, and they've said that. So, but then I want to flip it a little bit. What about that nurse that said that? What kind of place do you have to be in order to say that to someone you've worked with for years? How much fear, pain, suffering, so much pain and suffering in that whole situation. It's just not the one person that was attacked. It's this other person as well. And then like, what is going on? To me, that is just so much pain, so much suffering. Trauma responses in there, like from, my years of working with folks with trauma and then my own trauma, like it just shines that. So here we are, this collective trauma happening. And, like that's why Sandra and I wanted to come on and speak, because we have to talk about it. We need to, not have to, we need to. In order to heal from this, we need to talk about it and figure out what we're going to do. And there's not just one perfect solution. There's just many things, but we need to at least speak to what's happening. And in the front lines, as we're, working with nurses and on the, I'm working frontline and back at work and seeing, like, I didn't work through COVID, but now I'm seeing the after effects. So here I was working before COVID, was injured, healed throughout, coming back to work in the last few months. And this is, it's just a horrible thing I'm seeing. And then what I witnessed with you, Sandra. And that's why I think we need to stand by each other, no matter what our points of view are. And that, this, like, ask why, like, just be human, be kind, compassionate. And if we can't, then ask why. Why can't I? Why did I attack her? And why do I feel this? And this is the mental health crisis.
Yeah, I want to talk even more about what happens, because you and I have a similar understanding and a pretty strong understanding as well of like what happens when we're triggered, and when some of those old wounds are picked open. And when we talk about trauma, like there's so many different degrees, and some people may be listening and think, well, I haven't experienced trauma, I haven't, I don't have any kind of trauma response. But I'm gonna just put that to bed, because every single one of us has a trauma response. Every single one of us has experienced some form of trauma. I'd be willing to wager that, like, that every single human being has probably experienced some form of trauma in their life. And maybe it's not, where you you're looking after domestic violence patient, and the partner is in the room and he's threatening you, or you've been attacked by a patient, or you've been attacked in your in your personal environment, in your community, or you've been raped, or you've been a part of war, or something huge like that, in an abusive relationship. It doesn't always have to be these big things that we think of. It's actually the smaller ones over time, like these death by 1,000 paper cuts, I believe they say, where it just over time it creates such a huge wound. And what happens to us when we are triggered, when somebody says or does something to us that makes us feel afraid, and when we're afraid, we don't even know, our nervous system is just hijacked. And it goes right into its response, right? It's doing all of its cascade of everything that it has to do to keep you safe. Even if the threat is not legit, like, your life is not endangered, everything's going to be fine, but your body responds as if you're being chased by somebody with a knife. And so when our body responds like that, it's somewhat out of our control at that point, but we can learn how to control it. And I do think actually that majority of nurses are in trauma response as soon as we walk in the door, particularly right now. I have some nurses in my program who work on COVID units, and from the moment they wake up in the morning, they feel it. They feel the adrenaline in their body. They feel their heart racing. They're nervous. They're scared. They're worrying about what's going to happen when they walk in there. And they, that living in that kind of fear response where your nervous system is just constantly on, it's exhausting, first of all. And we're very easily triggered, right? Like, you come home, your kid says one thing to you and you're like, blah, you explode. Or your manager says something, or a patient says something, or a colleague. And so when we're afraid, and we all have different fears, which I think is also important to talk about. It's not that, like, people who are against mandates and against all these other, I don't want to label people either, because that's creating a judgment on them. And we really have no idea each individual's personal situation. So we should really, as easy as it is to say, to stop judging everyone, because we all do it. We judge. I mean, it just happens. It doesn't really matter what your belief is, what your stance is, what your values are. I mean, it matters to you as an individual. It probably matters to your family as far as like how cohesive you are and aligned. But as far as in our workplace, it shouldn't matter, because really what I'm talking about here is the fear response. And no matter what you believe, we all are afraid of something. Like, we all have something that is scary that's happening to us right now, right? I mean, we can label it all, we can name it all the different fears that people who are for mandates and all the different fears of the people who are against mandates. We could put them into two categories and try to understand their fear. But the reality is that every single one of us is feeling some amount of fear. And that's where we enter into this place of protective mode, right? All of our walls, all of our barriers, our guards that are been set up inside of us to keep us safe, they're activated when we feel afraid. They're activated, and so then we get thrown into these patterns of thought, patterns of behavior, in order to try and protect ourselves. And it's to varying degrees, of course, right? People who are doing their self-healing, and they're working through their trauma, and they're finding these new perspectives, and they're able to resume control when they are triggered. Those people they still have fear, they're still triggered, but they're able to choose their response. They're able to say, you know what, instead, I'm not going to lash out at you. I'm going to just, be with what I'm experiencing, and, maybe come at it with a different response. But people who are in this constant state of fight and flight, and they're in panic fear mode, as soon as they get triggered, sometimes we just get sucked in. And we don't even know what our response is. I'm thinking about this nurse you're talking about who said that to her colleague. And what must have happened to her to be triggered, to feel like that was some way to make her feel safe, right? In some way, it seems all like totally fucked up and backward, but it's an innate natural thing that we do, right? To try to keep ourselves safe. We have these words, we have these thoughts, we have these patterns of behavior. So
that's trauma.
Yeah, that's trauma. Exactly. I don't know if you want to speak any more to that. If I didn't lose everybody in my confused analogies, but yeah.
No, that was good, Sandra. No, that was really good. It just kind of speaks to like the behavior, the behavior around trauma and understanding it. And I think it's just really, how do we educate, and this is you and I trying to take care, right? We're nurses. We are trained, we're moms, we care about what's happening, right? And that's why we're here. And it's like, how do we educate and help understand what's happening to us and our colleagues and our peers and the people we care about in our world, right? And I think it's really from that trauma informed lens. And it's just remembering that we have to keep our biases in check, and we need to get past what has happened here and what is happening to us. And how do we do that? By like somehow connecting again in some shape or form, and and finding safety. Like, how are we going to find safety? And is that, and this is not going to be, it's not going to be an easy process. And I'm not saying that everyone has trauma. You can have trauma and still be triggered, or I mean, you don't have a trauma injury per se, but you can be triggered, in situations. But it's like, how do we, as a culture of nurses, and what's happening in our workplaces and our many different environments, walk forward when we know that we're so short staffed, our nervous system is going to be just, we never have a time to shut off, right? So it's like, how do we take care of our nervous systems, our emotional and our mental health in an environment that's so sick?
Yeah, that's it. That's like the question. That is the question. And I think when I bring up, the commonality of the fact that we are all experiencing some form of fear is to, in some way, also to draw the connection between what we can, just say as our shared humanity, right? We are all different. Diversity is a key element of humanity. We're all different. We're all experiencing life different. We're all going through our own hoops and hurdles and challenges. We all have different beliefs and values. We all stand on our own island of what's important to us, and we're all afraid of different things. But that's what makes us unique, and that's what makes us so amazing here, is that we are all different. And if we could remember that, right, and start to look at each other from that lens of trying to see that this is another human being. This is another human being who is trying her best or his best to figure this life out. And we're all working with the guidebook that we received, right? And as messed up as many of those guidebooks are, as far as receiving influence from all the different sources we've had, we could go down lots of different trails with that conversation, but I'm talking more about the guidebook of what's true for you, and really listening to that, and recognizing each other and our connection, our undeniable connection, because you can't deny it. You sit in the same room as somebody and you have conversation with somebody and you learn about their life, there is a connection, there is spark, it's energy between us. We cannot deny that connection, but fear gets in our way of seeing it, right? And so I do think that it is critical, I agree with you, that we find a way to experience safety. And that is our way back to that remembering of our common shared connection, humanity, and compassion for each other, for each other's unique lives and fears and everything. I think of myself and how, every day I'm triggered, honestly. Any day I leave my home or am with clients or doing, work on social media or anything, I'm triggered by something. It happens all the time. It's these emotional responses that happen inside of us. And, but it takes a real reframe and a capacity to sit in control, to be able to say my response to this instead is going to be compassion for that person. My response to this, as I've talked about, Care Bear stare, right? That's how I teach my kids it too. It's because they get triggered. I can see them, right? They're out, they're angry about something, or they say, can we go to this place? And we're like, well, we can't go there. And that they're triggered, then they're pissed off, and then they're rude to their brothers. And, and I'm just I try to reframe it into that lens for them as Care Bear stare. Let's try to find love and compassion for this situation, for everybody who's afraid. And I think that's, a part of, there's two pieces I think that are really essential in us moving forward and for finding healing as a culture in nursing, but even beyond. And the safety is one, and I want to talk about that in just one second. And then compassion is the other. And I want to specifically talk about safety just for a second, because I recognized in my reflections after everything that happened was that by me making some of my beliefs more public, I triggered people, and my actions made other people feel unsafe. And that crushes me, because just having worked with me, that creating a safe space it's my foundation. It's how I do my work. It's how I do my work well. And it's how everything that I do in my work works, is because you have to create safety. Nobody will drop their guard. Nobody will be authentic, completely authentic, unless they feel safe and that they can trust. And so by me making some of my beliefs public, it drew a line for people and said, oh, she's not safe. I can't come to her. But if that's the case, if that's how it made for you feel and you're listening, I want you to know that, that I'm sorry. first of all, that that's how it made you feel, because I know what that feels like, and I know what guards feel like, and I know how, what your body responds in when you get armored up and you're like, holy shit, I was vulnerable, I thought that person was safe and they're not safe. And also to speak to that part of you, that part deep inside of you that knew beforehand that I was, because that hasn't changed. Just because I believe something that maybe is different than you, it doesn't change what you saw or what you felt before. Because I really, every single day I sit with people who hold all sorts of different beliefs from me. And it's one of the gifts of doing this work, or I wouldn't say the gift, it's one of the gifts that I have, and I know you have, and I know many others have, of in order to do this work, is that we can table what we believe and sit and hold space for you. It's not about me. It's not about, what my family believes or what side of the fence we stand on. It's about being with each other. And that's why this work has been so effective. It's because we're able to be vulnerable with each other. We're able to talk about our fear and our shame and all of those things, and put that stuff, like I say, drop our guard or drop our armor, so that we can have that authentic connection. And what I realize is that by being public with, with something, is that people armored up, they were like, she's not safe, I have to put up my guard with her. And I know that my, just me acknowledging that, and feeling compassion for the pain that created for people, as well as an understanding, but also an acceptance that if that's where you land, then that's where you land. But if you want to try and make your way back to that place before that felt I was safe and felt I was somebody that you could trust, I'm willing to work through that with you. But I'm also okay if it's not, because I know that there are a lot of other people here who can deliver the same kind of offering that will maybe create a different sense of safety for you. And just one more note on that, Katrina, is that although I know that it created a sense of insecurity and unsafety, if that's a word, in others, it created a new sense of safety, because there are also a lot of people who are really shut down in their voices. In nursing, that's pretty global. But even more so, as you talked about in the beginning, right, of this division and how we are unable to speak about what is true for us. And there are a lot of people who feel very isolated and very alone in what they believe. And so, yes, by being public, it created it created a freaking tidal storm of stuff, but it also allowed some of those people to see that there was a safe place for them and their truth. And so, and for that, I have a lot of gratitude, because so it's a very difficult place where I stand right now. But I, as always, I just want to try and be real, and acknowledge the impact of my actions, and to come to that place where I'm seeing the impact, and I have nothing but love and understanding and compassion for the people that feel harmed, and for myself that feels harmed as well, and gratitude for the people who now see a bit of a flame of hope, that there is support out there that wouldn't be biased, that would that is open to listening to their point of view, their beliefs. So anyways, I could ramble on. I don't know if you have anything you want to jump in there with.
Beautiful. That's beautiful, Sandra. This is why I love you so much, is just how real you are and brave, and you just speak your truth. So, what you see is what you get, always with you. So that's why I'm so grateful for the human that you are, and the work that you do. And what this brings up for me is my background in nursing is harm reduction. And, I try my best to walk with that trauma lens, right? That trauma sensitive lens. And, I'm going to come back to that all the time, because I think as humans, we need to provide, and as nurses, we're taught this respect and dignity, and then compassion and understanding, and then the no judgment. We're not going to judge you because of your actions, or, and we need to, you and I have walked different paths, Sandra, right? Like we have, and I love you just the same. And I always will. And people around me that have decided, whatever their decisions are, I'm not gonna drop them for I know in their heart who they are. And it's just looking at a person and just, really, yeah, that human aspect. We need to be real and be ourselves again and find ourselves again, because we've been told and controlled. And there is a sense of safety in being controlled in a pandemic, and some of that control is going away. So it's like, again, I'm going to bring it back to that safety. How do we find safety? I think we just need to be authentic, real, and compassionate with each other, and no, not judging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would add on to that we need to surround ourselves with people and community
Mm-hmm.
that makes us feel safe. And
Yes.
I know that's, the work you do, and it's definitely the work I do as well. And, there are other people, though. There are lots of other peer networks, coaches.
Yeah.
There's lots out there. It's more than I ever knew anyways. Like,
Mm-hmm.
going through everything that I went through when I was nursing, I didn't know there was anything at that point. And so maybe more has come out in the last couple of years, but definitely there is a ton of resources out there if you just start looking for them. And I know that Katrina and I, I'll let you speak to what you do, but and I'm sure the listeners have a sense of it anyways, but we pride ourselves on creating these safe environments for people, because we know that and let's just narrow it on nursing, is that nursing is not a safe place. It's not. Our
Mm-hmm.
healthcare system is not a safe place. As you've said, it's a sick place, and a traumatized place, and it traumatizes us and makes us sick. And it's not safe to speak your truth, whatever that is. It's not safe. And even if we could table all the COVID stuff, like before that, it was not safe. It was not safe to talk about your burnout or your moral distress or your pain or your trauma or your mental health, your emotional health. It was not safe to talk about those things. And that's where the podcast started with, and definitely the work that I do. And I know you too. And it's just, everything's been kind of clouded with this COVID. And it's like, if we could just tease that part out and come back to like where we were before, because these problems were all here then, before, and they're still here now. And they've just been made worse, I think. And that's where I talk about, like, we've been pushed to the edge. And so, the problem was like this mounting, like simmering pot, like just ready to explode. And then we added in COVID, and it's like everything's just come. And did it need to? Probably. As far as like where we need to go with our system and make the changes that need to happen, sometimes things need to really explode before they can be changed. But just to circle back to what I was starting to talk about as I went off on another tangent there, but really like the work that I'll just speak to what I do, and then I'll let you share. But holding space really for nurses. I became trained as a coach because I knew that I wanted to meet people in a much more holistic way. I wanted to be able to support people with not just their physical symptoms or their mental symptoms. I wanted to treat people and the way that they deserve to be treated. And I wanted to be able to look at people the way that they deserve to be looked at, and to start, looking at all the different parts of us and how they work together, how they're working for us or working against us, and try to tease those things out and offer people healing. And a big part of my ability to do that is creating safety and creating trust. And I realize that I've, taken a bit of an axe to that for some people. but I can't undo that. It's done. And where I land right now is that I plan to just continue doing this work. There are so many nurses out there, and like I said, we'll just keep it within nursing, because if we start going anywhere beyond, it's suffering everywhere. But in just within nursing, there is so much suffering, and it is my passion and a huge part of my purpose, I believe, here in this life, to support people in this way, and just to really allow them to drop their guard, to be real. I've wagered before that I think the cure for all of human suffering is authentic connection, and I stand behind that, because I see what it does when people can be vulnerable and talk about what's really happening and own their truth, and have it not judged and criticized, but just held and said, like, yeah, I see you. Yeah, I feel that must be, I can understand what you're going through, or whatever is offered back, empathy, and just being there with people. So I mean, of course, I pull from all the knowledge and the skills and the training and everything that I've done in the program that I run, but at the very essence of it, that's what it is. It's just creating that safe, trusting place for people to share their pain and their suffering, and be held in it, versus judged, because that's what happens in nursing and in the world, right? We're judged. Look at the whole stir of this conversation is judgment. So yeah, and like I said, I'll let you talk about what you do. So yeah, I know the foundation is essentially the same for sure. So
Well, I know when I came to you and we first met, Sandra, it was really a scary thing to talk about what had happened to me in my nursing, and you just made it like your podcast when I spoke on there, and you just you did you gave me a safe container, and really and so we all need. So I just want to validate that for you, and that has always been the place that you bring for me. And again, with Nurse to Nurse, we Nurse to Nurse peer support came out of my own lived experience of not just my injury of PTSD and other associated traits that came along with it, uh, but was also my personal lived experience, and then all the years of working as a nurse in the front lines, and learning what, in mental health and with folks with substance use disorders, and with trauma, and how to approach people that have had those things happen to them, because they can smell BS from a mile away. It's amazing. So you cannot, you have to be who you are, and real and kind and not threatening in any way, because otherwise walls will go up and you won't get anywhere, and there will not be any healing happening. So, for me, Nurse to Nurse came because I saw a Nurse to Nurse peer support, the peer support piece. I worked with peers that, peer support workers that were, people that use drugs. I worked with people that used needles, and, lived like without a home. And I saw how, as a nurse, if I approached someone that was, using drugs, and maybe in a psychosis, and, they didn't know my story. We're taught that we're not supposed to be authentic and tell our story as a nurse. But if I went with a peer that had that same experience in a place of recovery, it was a beautiful, just a beautiful connection that happened, and it supported them coming into, into care. Really, it broke that barrier. Mm-hmm. So all of those things that I learned doing that work with peer support workers, and then, my husband being a firefighter, and then working with police that had peer support, and EMS, in the city I work in, have peer support. I was like, why aren't we doing this? I meet nurses that are homeless and struggling with mental health and substance use disorders. I know nurses that have died by suicide, and have died by overdose. So, and are actively using substances. So we need to do something different. So Nurse to Nurse came to be that way. Like, so every single thing that I have lived and worked and transfers very well, because it's just being, respectful and kind and non-judgmental. And those are like, the concepts of harm reduction and concepts of trauma informed, being, and then that peer support piece is really, hey, I recognize you, I see you, I feel the same, like, yeah, validation, I have been through that. And then it's always that hope piece, because here I am in a place of recovery, and you can do it too. I believe in you. So Nurse to Nurse, that foundation that's there, and that's really the work we do. It could be one-to-one, it's peer circles, a peer-to-peer wellness program, and it's essentially the same work you do, Sandra. And just but it really, again, I'm going to circle around. It's building that safety, that container, and being real and accepting each other with whatever beliefs we have. And that is one thing we bring into our circles. There's so much, discourse around, where you fall on that belief system of COVID, and then there's all those other people that are in between that aren't talking, or aren't getting support because they're so fearful, and they're not sure what your belief might be, and are you going to drop me as a friend because, or see me differently? Are you going to judge me and discriminate against me because I want to speak my truth? So it's like, how do we walk together going forward? To build that safety.
I think that, like, as you were explaining that, like, I had it in like a vision in my mind of this, like, of a group of people. And you're right, there is like the larger group who are afraid to speak, because there is so much judgment, which just, circles us way back to what's stimulated us to have this opportunity for this conversation, is just the fear of, the fear and the shame and the anxiety and all of it, wrapped up into what we're going through. And I wonder if we could just leave people with, of course, I'll, in the show notes of the episode, I'll have all of our links so people can find us. They can read about what we do in more detail, and they can connect with us. And I strongly encourage everyone who's listening to reach out to both of us, or one of us, whoever you like. And we all need somebody in our corner. It's just, I can't imagine going through everything that I have gone through in my own healing journey, and I'm sure you would say the same, without having a support team. Like, it's not that we can't. I mean, we could all Google everything and find all the tools and the resources. Like, it's not like we can't do this stuff on our own. But most of us aren't, and the other half of us, or whatever, it's so much easier if you have people to support you. And it's like, Katrina was talking about the window of tolerance in the beginning, and when you are dysregulated, or you're outside of that window of tolerance, it takes internal resources that you build over time to help pull you back in, but it also takes external resources. It takes a support network. I tell you, when we were hit with this, was it 2 weeks ago now, or 1 week? I can't remember now. 2 weeks, maybe, almost.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
And the first thing that was in my head was like, where are my people? And I was messaging, and I was calling my friends, and like just telling them like fuck, I need some help. I need to talk this out. Like, I need an ear. I need someone to just hold space for me. And they were all like, when you have peers who are in the same, sort of capacity, I guess, to hold that space. It's a gift, and so I really, we all need it. So I'm just encouraging every single person who listens to this, if you're still here at this point of the episode, to reach out to somebody to get some support. You don't have to wait until you're absolutely drowning and in complete despair before you get help, before you get some guidance, before you get someone to link arms with you to help you through whatever it is that's happening. And in fact, it's so much easier if you don't wait until that point, right? Because then you're in crisis and you have to deal with the crisis moment before you can even start getting at the healing. And but I wondered if we could leave everyone with just maybe like one, like what would be your top tip for finding safety, finding compassion, acceptance for one another, kind of like dropping back the judgment, creating a pause. I mean, those are kind of things that come to my mind, but what's, maybe you could share with us, what would be your like last final nugget of wisdom for everyone who is listening?
Oh, that's a big one, Sandra. Oh, yeah, I guess, it's it's so, there's so much I want to say, but really, I guess finding self-compassion, the self-compassion, like we've talked about a lot of like giving compassion. It's like bringing it back to yourself,
Mm.
no matter what your belief is, no matter where you stand, no matter what experiences you've had, even though they may be really shitty, is to be like compassionate to yourself and remember how important you are, and that uh, you deserve to feel good. You deserve to feel whole again. You deserve to get the support you need. You deserve to take time off. You deserve not to be talked to in a tone that is disrespectful. And you have the right to speak to those that you trust, and to really, yeah, just remember how important you are. Give yourself some love. Yeah.
I love that. And it's just reminding me of, loving kindness is what they call it in like Buddhist psychology, right? Loving kindness, meditations, but where they talk about it as, first you offer it to yourself. And then you imagine, and I've gone through this past couple of weeks, is giving myself all the love and compassion, and then imagining, you and what you were going through, and sending all that same love and compassion and understanding, and thinking about all of the people who have been repressed or shut down or discriminated against or judged. And I started just with thinking about nursing and just all of the nurses who have been pushed down for so long, right? So long. Our voices have just been muffled and gagged, and just, we don't want to hear from you. Like, just sit down and shut up and do your job. And the fuel that comes from holding compassion for that, and like really feeling into how awful that is, to feel powerless and to feel hopeless, right? To feel like your life is not even yours to manage, to control. And just holding that just in my own personal space and in my own heart, it is the fuel that keeps, that keeps me here with you again today, and just to keep moving forward. Because I think it's a reflection, and I'm going to use what you said in the meeting that we had a couple weeks ago, but just that this is a symptom of the sickness that is in our system, but also like in our world. And so the more we have these open, honest conversations, the more we heal, and the more we move forward. Right. Yeah. So I'm just so grateful for you in so many ways. And but for today, like really just to be able to be here with me and to be so honest and real and authentic and all those things that you're reflecting back to me, because I mean, we literally are looking in a mirror at each other. So I just really honor that and love you just endlessly. Yeah. And to everyone that's listening, I hope that you hear our hearts and you know that we are standing in this with you together, no matter where you stand. There is safe, loving, open, accepting, compassionate support right here for you. And we hope that we get to connect with you and support you along your way. So thank you so much, Katrina.
Thanks so much, Sandra.
I personally want to thank you for taking your time to listen to this podcast. It is my truest honor to sit with these nurses and witness them tell parts of their story. We as human beings have a deep need to be seen and heard, and this is my way of helping nurses in particular find their voice. Please know that the opinions shared in this podcast are those of the individual sharing them and not a reflection of any employer or regulatory body. We are sharing our truth, and that may not always resonate with you, but I'm guessing if you're listening, that something has rung true for you in this podcast. Our stories offer healing and create connection, two things that we as nurses need as we navigate the jungle of a healthcare career. So thank you for being witness, and if you feel inclined to reach out to the guest on today's episode to offer validation and appreciation, you can always find their contact in the show notes, as well as other links to the offerings of Sandra Payne Wellness. If you'd like to be a part of the community, join our private Facebook group, Surviving Nursing. And if you'd like to share your story on the End the Silence podcast, be sure to reach out. When we can come out of the shadows and into our light, we can create the change that is needed. And when we do this work together, we are so much stronger. Thank you for listening.